Have you ever experienced this emotion? I just feel too weak to pray, or I don't know what to pray, or I don't know how to pray. Romans 8:26 through 30 gives us some indications of the fact that we're not alone in this emotion, that there are others that have felt it, and that there is an answer. And Paul himself understands. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weaknesses, he says. For we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. I had a professor in college, in fact he was the president of our college, Dr. Charles Tyre. He said his favorite prayer was 3 long sighs at the end of a day, at the end of a long day. And so those sighs directed toward God in faith, in the Spirit, may be deeper prayers than you can ever utter with knowledge. It's not saying that we shouldn't try to pray. We shouldn't understand what we're praying for. We shouldn't pray with wisdom and with words, but that the deepest prayers, the prayers that are most connected, are those that are the prayers beneath the prayers. And he goes on, he says, and God, who searches the heart, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And as we get a connection here between our spirits and God's Spirit, so that prayer becomes very powerful. It becomes a way of agreeing with God. And you say, well, what if what God wants is something that's counterproductive to what I want? There's something that adverse to me. It's something that brings deep pain and sorrow to my life and derails all my plans. Well, he goes on, he says, we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And so the purposes of God are always in line with the purposes of those who are seeking God, whether we know it or not. The deeper purposes, the deepest satisfaction comes from, even if we suffer, even if we know some pain, even if we experience heartache, and even if we have to struggle, it ends well. It comes together. It comes together in a purpose that includes us. That's for our well-being. God's glory and our good. And then he explains a little bit more. It's easy to get side-railed here, but he says, for those he foreknew, and I don't know how a God who's outside of time and space and for whom past, present, and future are always happening, foreknows, but he sees it all. He sees the parade. He sees the decision-making process that we're involved in. He sees what he's doing in our lives, and he's at work in our lives, and he can see an outcome, and he knows, you see, he searches the heart, and he knows the mind of the Spirit, but he also knows your mind. He knows your deepest intentions. That's how, with Peter, Jesus could know Peter's love, even though Peter had miserably failed him and 3 times asked Peter, do you love me more than these? Well, feed my sheep. And so he knows, and in that knowledge, he has a destiny for us. For whom he knew, Paul says, he predestined, and to become conformed to the image of his Son. So what's God's destiny for you? To be like Jesus, to look like Jesus spiritually, to take on the values of Jesus and the character of Jesus, to be the presence of Jesus in the world, to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn within a large family. Paul goes on, and those he predestined, he also called. How do you know if you're called? Well, you know if you're called because you're developing this desire to be predestined to become conformed to his image. That's at the core of things. You're hearing this word, and you're responding to this word even now. And those he predestined, he called. And those he called, he also justified. We don't have to justify ourselves. Self-justification is pointless. And it's needless. And those he justified, he glorified. And so that's the word for the day. You don't know how to pray. You're unsure of how to pray. You're too weak to pray. The Spirit helps in your weakness. It's not all about you. The word for today is relax. Relax. And let God work in you, and let God lead you along, and let God lead you to that great destiny that he has in store for you. May God bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and be gracious unto you, and give you shalom.